Thanks all for being here today. Happy World Snake Day. Of course, snakes really need this day so that we can celebrate them and create a little bit more awareness about them. So for the webinar today, I am going to switch my video off and share my screen. Like I said, if you have any questions, please feel free to add comments in the chat. So welcome everybody. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. This is our first time using Google Meet, so if there are any issues, this will be recorded. So if you have any problems, feel free to give us a shout. So as I mentioned, today's World Snake Day, and it's really an important day to be able to create awareness about snakes. And I'm sure most of you here already have some kind of interest in snakes, and for good reason. So we'll just be talking about a little bit about the education and conservation work that Save the Snakes is doing in South Africa and why this is important. So snakes are an incredible group of animals, and they have such unique evolutionary adaptations to so many different environments. And within these environments, they play an incredibly crucial role, both as predators as well as prey. As predators, they help maintain populations of frogs, rats, and mice, while still consuming many other animals, including lizards, small mammals, and even fish. But as much as snakes are at the top predators in many of these ecosystems, they themselves are also prey to many birds, mammals, and even other snakes. Without snakes, many of these ecosystems would collapse, and in some way or another. And because snakes are a natural form of pest control for rats and mice, without snakes, we would very obviously have many diseases being spread. Another very important point about snakes is that their venom is often used for medicinal purposes. This is often not shared information, and it's really critical that people understand that, snakes have this valuable purpose. Many of the toxins that are found in venoms are actually used to develop drugs to treat cancer, high blood pressure, as well as pain. But snakes are not exactly the most popular animals around. In some cultures around the world, snakes have been worshipped and have been considered sacred. But this has been a very small population, as for the most part, snakes have in fact been considered evil. They are often feared and most often killed. One of the popular events that does occur in the United States is the rattlesnake roundup. Some of you may be familiar with this. And during these roundups, thousands of rattlesnakes are killed unnecessarily. It is also this fear of snakes that has led to many myths being told, including things like snakes being bad omen, snakes being chasing people, snakes having hearts in their tails, and snakes being able to drink milk. Of course, all of this is untrue. And it's only if we can dispel these myths that we can do proper education, and being able to allow people to see that myths have been spread over generations and generations, and it has been incorrectly spread. So the fear of snakes is also a common cause for human-snake conflict. And human-snake conflict often results because people are scared of snakes and indiscriminately kill both non-venomous and venomous snakes. This is out of the belief that all snakes are venomous. Again, another myth that needs to be dispelled. But often it's conflict with venomous snakes that leads to situations such as snakebite. But what is snakebite? So in 2017, snakebite was declared a neglected tropical disease by the World Health Organization. It had been on the neglected tropical disease list in 2013 and then removed. But because of the seriousness of the issue on such a global scale, it needed to be re-added. And the point needed to be made that snakebite does in fact affect people in a very serious way. The snakebite occurs when people or livestock are envenomated by a venomous snake. A snakebite affects millions of people on a global scale, whether that is through disabilities or a direct envenomation, or having some family member disabled that was the primary breadwinner for that family. Current statistics show that between 81,000 and 138,000 deaths occur as a result of snakebite. And currently, the only known treatment is anti-venom. So in 2017, Save the Snake was formed to protect snake populations around the world, both through education and community outreach, to create harmonious relationships between humans and snakes. We do this in conjunction with our conservation partners around the world, with the main objectives of building capacity of local communities, mitigating human-snake conflict, strengthening community-based conservation of snakes, as well as fostering support for snake conservation. Our conservation partners are based around the world, specifically in regions that need support. We have been able to support a large number of people through our Save the Snakes support grants. When it comes to education and outreach, these regions are particularly important, and we try to support our conservation partners in any way that we can, because they're doing incredible work to be able to educate the communities where they are currently based. So identifying that there was a need to work with rural snakes in South Africa, I decided that we needed to start a project in South Africa and shed more light on African snakes. African snakes are quite charismatic, and most people know about them in some context or the other, particularly a snake like the black mamba. But particular focus needs to be made on medically important venomous snakes. So according to the WHO, we have 6 Category 1 medically important venomous snakes, which are on the left-hand side. And these snakes are classified as Category 1 because they cause the most fatalities and are quite widely distributed. So we have the puff adder, got the black mamba, got the Mozambique spitting cobra, got the Cape cobra, the snouted cobra, and the green mamba. We also have Category 2 medically important snakes, and these are snakes that have restricted distributions but still can cause fatalities, or these are snakes that don't cause as many fatalities. So these are on your right, and these include things like the black mamba, the vine snake or the twig snake, the black spitting cobra, Biberon stiletto snake, a gaboon adder, rinkhals, and forest cobras. And to be able to do any kind of work in South Africa, I decided that it wasn't up to me to do it alone. And so I identified the Hoedspruit Reptile Center as a key partner to be able to start our initiative. And we're very glad that they came on board. And so now we'll hear from Chris Cook, who will be sharing a little bit about the Hoedspruit Reptile Center.
Hiral, thanks very much for that. I'm just going to continue to speak and assume that everybody can hear me. I'll keep an eye out on the screen if there's any issues, but if there isn't, then I'm just going to assume that everybody can exactly hear what I'm saying. So thanks again for organizing the event, and yes, happy Snake Day to everybody. I think I'll start by just introducing the Reptile Center to everybody in case you don't know who we are and where we are located. We are located in our northern province of Limpopo in South Africa, and we are very close to the famous Kruger National Park and the equally famous Bladder River Canyon, which is the largest green canyon in the world. And we're really in a very prime location when it comes to snakes. Here, I can go to the next screen here. This is a picture of the snake park when it was built way back in 1984. So we've been open for the last 36 years. And for the last 36 years, we've been doing really good reptile and amphibian conservation work. It might be difficult to see from this picture, and it doesn't look like much there, but the entry fee to the snake park back then, if you can have a look carefully, for children, it was R1.50, and for adults, it was R2.50, which is ridiculously cheap, but back then it was a lot more more money than what it is now. In the background there is the mountains which lead into the canyon. So in 1984, as I said, we opened as Swadini Reptile Park, and over the sort of evolution of the park's history, the name has changed a bunch of different times. In 2006, we became Kamai Reptile Center, and then again in 2015, we became Kenyonga Reptile Center. Whilst I don't really know the full reasoning behind the name changes in the past, what I can say is that in 2019, we took the center over as the new owners and new managers, and we decided to change the name once again. And that was for a very simple reason. The past name changes we found were somewhat confusing. People often couldn't say the name of the center or spell the name either. And since we're located in the town of Hoedspruit, we thought best that we just name the center after the town. After all, we pull support much from our little town. It's a very small little town, and it just tells people exactly where we are located. So as of 2019, the park entered a new era of conservation, and we are now known as Hoedspruit Reptile Center. Next slide, please. So who exactly is Hoedspruit Reptile Center? Well, I have to say our entity has suffered greatly as a result of COVID. We used to be a staff complement of about 9 people, but currently the center is running on skeleton staff. The people that you can see on the screen now really are a team of passionate and dedicated conservationists. These are the guys that are at the forefront of reptile conservation in our area. And just to shed a little bit of light on who those faces are, in the top left-hand screen is Silence Mosuku. He was born in and around Hoedspruit, so he's a local guy. He's been with the center for quite a number of years. Beneath him is Given Glovu. He's also been with the center probably for a good 6 months now, but he did work at the center about a decade ago as well. And Silence and Given both are a critical part of our team. They are our curators, so their role at the center is to care for the animals and to make sure that everybody is happy and healthy, but they also have a big responsibility in conducting the various tours that the center offers, as well as, very importantly, our training program. One of the main focuses of the center is education. I'll touch on that in a little while. Then on the top right, that's myself, and I'm holding a boomslang, and beneath me there on the bottom right is Dr. Jessica Breiner. The center is in a very fortunate position now for the first time ever to have a fully qualified reptile vet on our team. And that gives us a tremendous advantage because not only can we care for the animals in an absolutely fantastic way should things go wrong, but we are also able to increase our capacity to rehabilitate injured reptiles that make their way into our doors. So whilst we're not strictly a rehabilitation center, we deal a lot with injured tortoises, injured snakes, injured chameleons, and without having somebody who's really an expert in the field of reptile veterinary medicine, it's very difficult to make a big difference here. So we're very happy to have Dr. Breiner on the team as well. So essentially the center is run and maintained and managed by the 4 of us for the time being, and although we're working very hard, and the center has taken a huge step backwards because of COVID, what I am very happy and proud to say is that we have taken massive leaps forward when it comes to our conservation. So what exactly does Hoedspruit Reptile Center do? First and foremost, we're a public entity, so we are a reptile zoo. People can come and visit the center and learn and appreciate the animals that we have on display. Our ethos is conservation through education and research, and we really live by this. It's really tricky, as everybody already knows and understands, at least partially, to teach people the truth about reptiles and amphibians, particularly in African countries. And we find this in many environments around the world where, reptiles and amphibians are deeply embedded with myth and legend, and there's a lot of negative connotations that surround these kinds of animals, particularly snakes. And really, if we're going to make any real strides in conserving them and protecting them, we have to change the way that people view them. And we have to create this positive outlook towards these kinds of animals. So we have a whole host of different ways that we teach people at the center, from general tours to training and even sometimes wildlife filmmaking. But we are very diverse in the way that we try to get our conservation message out to as many people within South Africa, and of course even beyond that, to the rest of the world. We also participate in situ and ex situ conservation programs. This is something that we're pushing quite hard at the moment, or at least since we've taken over the running of the center. And currently we are involved in several conservation projects which look at the captive breeding of certain animals to create insurance populations. I'll just mention a few of them. We are currently involved in the captive breeding program for the sun gazer lizard. As I mentioned, these animals, it might be worth writing them down and Googling them if you're not familiar with them. So we are part of the sun gazer working group, which looks specifically at protecting the sun gazer, an endemic lizard in South Africa. Then we also have a partnership with the Johannesburg Zoo, where we are part of 3 different projects. One for the endangered Pickersgill's reed frog, another for the Albany adder, and another for a Scolotes lizard species. So this is really the beginning of our captive breeding programs, but we really are pushing a lot with them. And of course, there's a lot of good reasons why we need to learn how to take care of these animals, should they ever have a reason in the wild where we have to perhaps pull from wild populations to ensure the survival of these kinds of animals. So it's really important that the center contributes to this kind of program. We also facilitate researchers in their work, and whilst the center itself doesn't really produce scientific publications, we have an amazing opportunity to help people that do that. So scientists will work very closely with the center, and we will do what we can to assist them in their research work, whether it's providing access to animals that they are studying, or even just facilitating accessibility to areas in the wild where those animals may be found. But wherever we can, we love research, and we love to help people that can further our knowledge on reptiles and amphibians. And then the last point, we provide venoms to vaccine producers for the manufacturing of life-saving anti-venom, as well as for research. This is a fairly new thing that the center is becoming involved in. We are pretty much finalizing plans for the construction of a venom extraction lab, and we're really looking forward to really start to contribute to the life-saving anti-venoms that are needed. So this is underway. Guys, that is essentially the point of Hoedspruit Reptile Center. We need to conserve and protect reptiles as best as possible, and Hiral will speak more about our joint project, which we've called CCAP. I won't say too much more about that now, but you can find us on social media, you can find us on Google, and if anyone is really interested in finding out more about what we do or how they can help, then they can contact us on our various different platforms. And in case anyone picked up the spelling error in that slide, I do apologize. Thank you, Hiral.
Thank you, Chris. So Save the Snakes and Hoedspruit Reptile Center have very similar goals when it comes to education and conservation. And so we decided to create this program that encompasses several different projects. The first of which is the schools project, and that, as the name suggests, targets schools. We work particularly in the Hoedspruit area, and our goal is to educate as many learners in different schools as we can. We also have a communities project which focuses on working with rural communities. And this is because most often human-snake conflict occurs within these rural communities, and they are the ones that need the most education. I'll speak a little bit more about all of these projects just now. Our healthcare workers project focuses specifically on working with hospitals, clinics, healthcare workers of any kind, so that they are equipped to be able to deal with snakebite in any given situation. Our anti-venom bank, as the name suggests, we have anti-venom, and Chris will speak a little bit more about this again. And lastly, our final project is our snake relocation training, which has not taken off yet, but we hope it will soon. And together, this makes CCAP. our snake education and community awareness program. So because of COVID, we have been very delayed in implementing our program, but nevertheless, we have been able to make a start. And while our target schools were in the rural communities, we have had to make do with some of the more privileged schools within the Hoedspruit town. But as we visited these schools, it became very obvious that snake education needs to be done everywhere. And these learners also very much needed that snake education. How we do our education is quite different to, I suppose, very many other education programs that you might know of. And one of the key ones being using actual specimens to be able to communicate the importance of snakes. When students are actually able to interact with these with the snake skull or with the rubber snake or even a snake shed, it really allows them to be able to think about snakes differently. Not only that, we also use non-venomous snakes for many of our interactions with learners. This is particularly effective because often, as soon as the snake comes out of the tub, you'll often see quite a few learners that are very scared. But as soon as they see one or two of the other learners that are not so scared interacting with the non-venomous snakes, they immediately change their reaction, and they come a little closer. They touch the non-venomous snake, and little by little, it starts to make an impact on them. This is a huge step in being able to mitigate that fear. Another core part of our education is doing demonstrations with venomous snakes. Now, the reason why this is very important is because the learners need to be able to see the snake's true behavior. For example, in the image on the left bottom, you can see that Chris is holding a boomslang. And what he's demonstrating here is the fact that boomslang, as the name suggests, are tree snakes, and their natural behavior is to want to go into the tree as opposed to turning back and attacking Chris. And this also goes a long way in educating people about small behaviors with regards to some of these venomous snakes. A quick little statistic that we actually found. So we asked the question to learners, how do they feel about snakes? So as you can see, school 1 had learners that were a lot more afraid of snakes than learners at school 2. Now, school 1 is kind of your average day-to-day school. They sit in a classroom, they learn about what they need to learn about. And school 2, while pretty much more or less the same, learn far more about the environment, spend a lot more time outdoors. This again shows you that being able to incorporate learning about the environment makes a huge difference in the way people or learners start to understand the environment. It also stresses the importance of being able to incorporate knowledge about snakes within the school curriculums, and hopefully through our education project, we will be able to do this. Another big part of our program is our healthcare workers project. And while we hadn't expected it to take off so soon, we are extremely pleased and we were very lucky to be able to visit our local hospital, Tinswalu Hospital. Now, Tinswalu Hospital is based in a local township. It's a rural community very close to the Hoedspruit town. It's largely tailored for people within this kind of rural community. And we were able to engage with the doctors, and it was really effective to be able to build this relationship with these doctors. As you can see, we weren't even given a proper room to be able to do a presentation. This was kind of a rundown church that they had at the hospital. But being able to still interact with these healthcare workers, being able to tell them the story of snakes and snakebite allowed them to build a more trusting relationship in our program and the Hoedspruit Reptile Center. And just to show you how effective this has been, just last week, I actually received a call from one of the doctors that didn't know whether a Mozambique spitting cobra had the same anti-venom, or rather they didn't know if that our polyvalent anti-venom could be used on Mozambique spitting cobras as well as black mamba bites. So being able to harness this relationship with doctors and healthcare workers is an absolute crucial part of being able to mitigate snake bites. As I mentioned, our communities project has obviously not taken off, but what we have been able to do is build valuable partnerships with people that already have projects set up within rural communities. So here we have partnered with an organization called Seeds of Light. They are running an art class, and so they invited us to talk about snakes. So as we went there, to talk about various reptiles, many of these learners were quite afraid. But as you can see on the left-hand side, by the end of the session, they were interacting with our non-venomous snakes, and they really enjoyed the session. So again, this emphasizes the point of being able to engage with people, to be able to mitigate that fear of snakes. Chris will now speak about the anti-venom bank.
Thanks again, Hiral. So very quickly, an anti-venom bank is pretty self-explanatory. We always decided from very early on that having an anti-venom bank at Hoedspruit Reptile Center would be extremely important for a number of different reasons. Firstly, for the protection of the staff, given the nature of the work that we do. There isn't a single day that goes by where we don't do something with venomous snakes. And because of our location and a lot of our hospitals being quite remotely positioned, and sometimes it takes a couple of hours to get there, we very much needed anti-venom at the park for our own safety. But it also became very apparent that a lot of our surrounding hospitals either didn't have a full stock of anti-venom or a reliable stock. So what we started to do is engage with other different stakeholders, and we've managed to develop 2 batches of anti-venom. One batch which is kept under really good conditions, and this is stock that has not expired. So it's good stock, if I can say that in a very loose way. And good stock we will make available to anyone that, of course, needs it. But it is something that that Hoedspruit Reptile Center has bought. So we've accepted this financial liability for this. The rest of the anti-venom is what I like to call bad stock. And again, it's a loose term. There's a lot of research showing that anti-venom is really effective even if it's past its expiration date. So in cases where vets may need expired stock, or sometimes hospitals that may need expired stock, people are not able to pay for it or utilize it, or if the hospital simply doesn't have any of their own, then we make this stock available to people with the full intention of being able to help people as much as possible. So of course, if somebody gets bitten by a snake, they will do what anyone will do, and that is go immediately to hospital. If that hospital then doesn't have anti-venom, they're going to get hold of us, and we will meet the patient at the hospital with the anti-venom. It doesn't go directly into the patient, of course. It gets handed over to the doctors, and then we have both available, expired stock as well as unexpired stock, depending on what the need is in that particular instance. So it was very important that we create the anti-venom bank, and as you can see from the photo at the bottom, we've got quite a lot. I think it's 22 vials of polyvalent anti-venom, which is used for the majority of our snake bites, and it covers all of the medically significant species with exception of the worm slung, which is the monovalent, and that's the white vials that you see there on the bottom right-hand corner. And we also have a couple vials of scorpion anti-venom as well. At this stage, Hoedspruit doesn't really receive that many cases that warrant anti-venom. It's really important that we are available to service the communities and offer help where we can. Of course, we're not doctors, we can't administer anti-venom ourselves, but we can work closely with doctors to try and make sure that people that are bitten by snakes, whatever the reason behind it was, can get the best support possible. And this is something that's really important to us. So we're super proud of the fact that we are able to produce this tiny little anti-venom bank, and hopefully it'll get used up very quickly and we can save some lives. Thanks, Hiral. Thanks,
Chris. So this program is really to showcase the importance of having partnerships. Save the Snakes is a non-profit organization. Hoedspruit Reptile Center is a private establishment that educates people about reptiles, and having this partnership allows us to bring people from different backgrounds, different expertise, and be able to put our heads together and create effective solutions. So the WHO has created this ambitious goal that by 2030, they would like to reduce all snakebite deaths and disabilities by at least 50%. Now, in order for this to be able to happen, we need more data on snakebite, particularly in areas where people are most vulnerable, which includes the tropical areas of the world, but also areas where we might think we know snake bites occur and might not be a problem, but could probably go unregistered. And this includes South Africa. It's very exciting for me to be able to do my PhD research on being able to gather more reliable data about snakebite in South Africa. Of course, one of the big factors in understanding snakebite is also understanding the behavior of venomous snakes. Within snakebite research, in the past few years, a lot of it has focused on understanding the human side of it, but it's become very obvious that we need to be able to understand snakes and snake behavior. This is so that we can prevent snakes from biting people in the first place. And so this is going to be a core part of my research as well. But what excites me about being able to do this education and conservation work, as well as this research on snakebite, is that everything we learn within the research world will then be able to be applied within the conservation space. And everything we learn in South Africa can then be applied to the rest of Africa and hopefully to the rest of the world. Earlier this week, I was part of a very exciting workshop on snakebite community engagement. This event was organized by Health Action International, and it brought together stakeholders from various parts of the world, from various different sectors. And what was really incredible was being able to discuss various topics in surrounding snakebite, everything from community education to advocacy, and different people sharing their story when it comes to snakebite. It also became very obvious that we need more collaboration between people from different sectors so that we can share our stories and share resources. Ultimately, if we can create a story that people feel that they can relate to or feel that there's a need for it, then we'll be able to attract funders. And at the moment, the biggest challenge when it comes to trying to find solutions for snakebite is having enough funding. And so hopefully the combination of our project, the combination of my research, and building networks like the one organized by Health Action International will really allow us to be able to move several steps forward in being able to prevent snakebite. So huge thanks to our partners and supporters from around the world. We will now be taking questions. So if anybody has any questions, you're more than welcome to either type it in the chat or you can unmute yourself and we can answer them. Yes, Oscar, you can ask your question.
Yes, I'm sorry I'm with the kid, but I would like to ask my question is related with trainings. I'm aware that most of we Africans, we are lacking trainings about how, let's say, handling snakes and so on, as well as the other things that you presented. I'm not aware if it's only for the case of my country, Rwanda, but as I realize, even when I post on your post, I said that most of Africans, we thought that Africans, they are satanic forces or they are ghosts. And that is what we are learned from our great parents and so on. And even these Bibles, which are also implicated these human snakes. How are you, how are you going to encourage more training opportunities for the people so that they know the snakes in order to avoid human snakes conflicts?
Hiral, if you don't mind, I'd like to jump in here.
Go for it.
Thanks, Oscar. It's a really good question, and when we chat to people all the time about snakes, one of the first things I like to ask people is, where did you first hear about snakes and who taught you about snakes the very first time you heard about it? And many people will say that they learned about snakes from a family member, somebody that they trust, and that's typically a grandmother or a parent or an uncle or aunt, something like that. And right from a young age, we are taught to fear snakes. As parents, one of the scariest things you could ever imagine is something bad happening to your children. And because we know some snakes are potentially dangerous, we tend to frighten our children into leaving snakes alone. And this instills this sense of fear permanently in people. You know, we would say things like, hey, don't go near that snake, it will bite you. And what we should rather do is not teach people that, but rather just teach people a mutual respect for snakes and the fact that if you leave a snake alone, it won't bite. So from a very early age, we are already taught misinformation. And naturally, we trust this information because this information comes from people that we trust. And we also trust that they know the truth. And we know that there's a huge educational gap, not only in South Africa and other African countries, but it's across the entire globe where people just are hanging on to this, these scientific inaccuracies. So that's the first thing. Now, to answer your question, what we are really excited about is our community engagement projects. Hiral did mention this in her presentation, and I can say we have met some absolutely fantastic organizations that have completely jumped on board with our CCAP project. And already now we have lined up another 15 schools that we are going to be reaching, and almost equally a number of different community projects that already exist that we just have to piggyback on top of. So it's very important to network, and I really feel that networking with platforms like this has allowed us to springboard our entire project, and it's gained such a lot of momentum. The only thing holding us back at the moment, as Hiral said, is funding and staff. And if we can resolve those two things, we can reach a wider audience much faster, and we can get into as many countries and in as many communities as possible, and make sure that we present good scientific education in a way that people really believe and understand what we're trying to say. So yeah, it's a huge challenge, but we're up for the challenge, and this is something that snake conservationists face around the world. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, you do. Thank you. And I think we still have guts to correct, as you said, so that we engage more people to collect those informations that they are taught by their parents or the great parents. And I think is the common main problem we do have in Africa, or even entire global world, where they have these venom snakes.
Thanks, Oscar. There's an interesting question posted in the chat, and Chris, I think you might want to answer this question as well. So the question is from Alexa, and she has asked, who made the first approach to the healthcare workers? Was it us? Was it them? And was this accepted immediately?
Sure, no problem. So it's a very simple answer. We took the first step. We're in a tricky situation, not a tricky situation, but our little reptile center has been around for the last 36 years. Sometimes when resources are available and they're on your doorstep, you don't always take advantage of them. We know of our immediate surrounding hospitals, and it's quite simple. We approached them. We contacted the hospitals. We found out who the relevant people were to speak to. We had sort of private small meetings with these people, and then beyond that, it's just a simple fact of organizing stuff. And remember that the point of CCAP is to get education out there, and it's partly funded by Save the Snakes, and it's partly funded by Hoedspruit Reptile Center, as well as our other sort of stakeholders. So we don't charge for these kinds of community engagement projects, and that is really key as well. Remember, a lot of the communities that we aim to reach can't afford to go to a zoo to go look at snakes behind glass, or just don't have access to educational material. So the onus really relies on projects to take that first step and go and engage with community members and the hospitals. And I have to say, our session with the hospital was super productive. We have been in contact with them several times on different snake emergencies, and already we're seeing the fruits of this. And now it's a case of copy and paste our program into more different hospitals, different medical entities and things like that. I hope that helps.
Thanks, Chris. Do we have any other questions?
Hiral, I do see there's another comment about snakes drinking milk. Snakes drinking milk is a bit of a fallacy. That's not to say that if somebody leaves a bowl of milk out and a desperate snake wanders across it and it is absolutely dehydrated, it will probably just drink any liquid. But the fallacy or the myth is that snakes need to drink milk and will actively go out and search for it. And it's important to remember that snakes do not drink milk naturally in the wild. Snakes don't take care of their babies and provide milk for them to allow them to grow like mammal does. So it is a bit of a fallacy. In fact, snakes are not able to digest milk. It's very dangerous for a snake to drink milk, and you can make a snake very sick because of it. So yeah, it's entirely possible. Many cultures in the world believe wholeheartedly in this myth, and some community members will fill bowls of milk and put them outside for snakes to come and drink. The fact that you witnessed a snake drinking milk, for me, it shows that the snake was really, really desperate. It's not part of their natural diet, and it would be a very unusual thing to have witnessed.
Thanks, Chris. We have another question. Is it good to get venom out of a snake? And I think what you're trying to say is that someone that was obviously breeding them or was keeping them as pets was doing this. So the short of it is really no. If you don't need to milk a snake, if you don't need to extract venom from a snake, then you don't need to do it. It's necessary when we want to create anti-venom and for research purposes. I'm not sure if that answers your question. I also don't know under what circumstances this person was extracting venom, but yes, only for specific reasons.
Yeah, here I'll have to agree with you there. I mean, it's a necessary evil when it comes to milking snakes for the production of anti-venom. Unfortunately, there isn't a better way of doing it for the time being. Some people are looking at synthetic anti-venoms, but the truth is we're probably at least 20 years away from any of that as a reality for treating snake bites. For now, extracting venom is done for two different reasons. One, for the production of anti-venom, and two, for scientific studies. You do find people on the internet or people that do snake shows around the world, which break off the teeth of venomous snakes, or they physically and surgically remove the venom glands from snakes. That's generally done as a safety precaution when people do these horrendous snake shows. It's never good for the snake. The snake generally dies eventually from it, normally from an infection that sets in around the mouth. Otherwise, if the snake's mouth is sewed entirely closed, then they generally can't eat or drink. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely not good for snakes to have venom extracted from them, but there are ethical and unethical ways that you can do this as well.
Yes, Cormac, go ahead.
How's it, guys? Congratulations on a great talk. Hoedspruit seems to be doing great work. It's just a question about the talk, actually, because my Wi-Fi broke up. Hiral, you were mentioning about the Pickersgill reed frogs and the Albany adder, but then, as I say, my Wi-Fi cut out. Have you guys got captive populations there, or use working with partners at field sites for the Pickersgill and the Albany adder?
Cormac, sorry, I know I'm poaching Hiral's session here, but if I can answer that, because that part of the project is really centered within Hoedspruit Reptile Center. So we're currently working with the Johannesburg Zoo on those two projects. Obviously, the Pickersgill's Reed Frog project is a well-established project, and where we will fit in is being a second institution to house populations, so that you don't keep all your eggs in one basket. Johannesburg Zoo has done exceptionally well with their program as it stands, and we've been selected as an entity really just to help support them. So far as the Albany adder project goes, we've also had conversations with Johannesburg Zoo. They're very excited about the possibility of us becoming a permanent participant in this kind of thing, but no, we don't have any Albany adders. That project is not something that has really started yet. That's really just in the discussion phases. If it really comes to fruition, then we'll be super lucky and happy to be a part of it. But for the time being, no, we definitely don't have. And it will probably remain a very tricky project to get right in terms of keeping and breeding those animals.
Great, thanks, Chris. I also, just to make a fun, I don't think Joburg Zoo has Albany adder either. I know for a fact they've got that great facility for the Pickersgill reed frog, but to the best of my knowledge, I don't think they have Albany adder at the actual zoo either.
No, so you're quite right. To my knowledge, they don't either. But you've got to start somewhere. You know, I think it's really good practice to start a project from a theoretical point of view, and then obviously at some stage, once you've got your enclosures set up and your SOPs drawn up and a real aim identified, then you've got to go out and collect animals, you know, for whatever the goals are for the project. But no, they don't have anything to the best of my knowledge. And as I say, I think that particular project is very much in its infancy still.
Great, thanks very much.
Okay, I see we have a couple of questions. So Swami, I'm going to answer yours. And the question is, what are the essential steps we should be we should take to spread education about snake conservation as a small research center. Really, you just need to be able to talk to people. Building relationships with people really goes a long way. And we found that it's because we share interesting things about snakes, interesting facts. People like to see that. People like to see why you're interested in a specific group of animals. Once you start to do that, that education will naturally start to spread. So I hope that answers your question. So the next question by Alexa is, I've read many articles about defanged educational snakes kept in captivity for the safety of handlers, and what's our take on that? So I'm gonna put this in a bit of a packaged answer, for the simple reason that ethics in snakes, when working with snakes, is really important. So with that first question, it's completely unethical to do any sort of tricks with snakes. It does more damage to the snakes. It stresses them out. You know, you're putting more stress on the snakes in a situation where they're already stressed out. They don't want to be in a basket when someone with the flute wants to do some kind of movement session, as they call them, the snake charmers. That's purely recreational purposes, and it's detrimental to the snake. As you say, I think these activities need to be banned. And the more awareness you start to create about this and the fact that it is wrong, hopefully that will lead to steps in such activities being banned. And the question regarding defanged snakes, in keeping them in captivity for handlers, the question is, why do you have snakes in captivity for educational purposes if you don't want to show people the right reasons that the snakes are there? The moment you remove or defang a snake, you're removing an essential part of that snake, and this is not useful for educational purposes. As Save the Snakes and as the Hoedspruit Reptile Center, this is not something that we approve of. If you want to be able to handle venomous snakes, you need to be able to have the correct training and then handle them even in captive situations.
Hiral, I think you make a lot of really good points there. And, you know, from my side, if you are going to keep venomous snakes in captivity, remember that snakes primarily use their venom to assist with the digestive process. And if you're going to be removing fangs and removing venom glands, you're really going to disadvantage that snake. It's probably going to die at some point, either due to stress or infection anyway. You know, centers that do defang for the safety of their handlers, I really got to question the ethics of those particular centers, or at least the training and the expertise of the people that are working with them. It's something that I would strongly discourage. Yeah, when it comes to people doing tricks with snakes, I mean, we see this all the time. You know, as an educator, we have a responsibility to the animals to make sure that we work with them ethically. That means, in my opinion, keeping the focus on the animal and not the presenter. You only need to look on a handful of YouTube channels or other television programs to pick up the stereotypical charismatic snake handler sort of stereotype. And a lot of people see this, a lot of people mimic it, and I cringe when I see people, the way that they treat the animals. And the unfortunate thing is, it's entertaining. And for a lot of these programs, it's a television program before it's a conservation program or an education program. So we feel very much or very strongly that we have to present the information to people in a very ethical way and a very careful way. You know, we've got to choose our words very carefully and make sure that we don't ever put the snake in the bad light. And we have to make sure that we have the best intentions for the snake at heart as well. If our presentations and the use of live snakes was going to detrimentally harm a snake or really disadvantage a snake, then we wouldn't use them. It wouldn't be right for us. I still see tremendous value in using live animals to teach people about snakes. Hiral mentioned this a little earlier as well. And that's because you really can only teach so much using a picture. You know, if you've got the live animal in hand or around you so that you can interpret their behavior, you can really change the way that people really feel about that animal. People need to see the truth, and we have to interpret that behavior correctly. You know, we always say at the snake park, there's no such thing as an aggressive snake, only a defensive snake. And this is such a classic example. Television programs and many snake shows like to capitalize on snakes striking or cobras going bananas, you know, striking and spreading a hood. You know, this is not the kind of behavior that we want to capitalize on. We instead of saying how the snake tries to bite, we tend to lean on the side and say, look at what the snake does to avoid a bite. You know, so there's a lot of different ways that you can spin this, and there's definitely good ways and bad ways.
Thanks, Chris. I hope that answers the question. How can we understand the behavior of snakes? Interesting question, Ray Mahan. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. I do apologize if I did not say that correctly. But research, there is already a lot of information out there on snake behavior. And what I can tell you is that you need to be able to just read what is currently available. Specifically, read books by well-known authors, experts that have published on snake ecology and snake behavior. And as I mentioned earlier, if you want any information, scientific literature on snakes, snake bite, snake behavior, snake ecology, do some reading. Google, in Google Scholar, you have a lot of literature at your disposal, and often this is the most reliable source of information because it has been done by researchers, by experts. So I hope that answers your question. So we have a question here. Do black mambas shed skins during their reproduction? That's actually something I'm not aware of either. Chris, do you know?
Snakes tend to shed their skin several times throughout a year. It's really dependent on how much that snake eats. The more the snake eats, the more the snake grows, and the bigger the need for the snake to periodically shed its skin. Snakes will also shed their skin to rid themselves of parasites as well as repair damaged scales. A lot of snakes will have a shed just before the onset of winter, and perhaps again just as spring starts. So there's a number of different ways that or reasons that snakes will shed their skins. So far as black mambas go, I can't say that I've ever fully noticed mambas specifically shedding their skin during reproduction as a species as a whole. It's entirely possible that individuals will from time to time, but it's more likely influenced by what they're eating and how much they're growing, and whether or not they are trying to get rid of parasites or repair themselves, and less to do with the fact that they're breeding.
Cool. Thank you very much. I think those are all the questions. Thank you so much for everyone for tuning in. Happy World Snake Day. And yeah, we hope that this webinar was helpful in communicating some useful information about snakes. If you want to contact us, we'll share the links on our social medias. The best way to get hold of us is probably on our various social media channels. So it's Save the Snakes and the Hoedspruit Reptile Center. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. Save the Snakes is on Twitter. Feel free to contact us. Thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. Have a good night.